Hello, my name is Mr. Laird, and today I will be reading to you from Alan Gratz's Ground Zero, a novel of 9/11. Brandon, a hole in the world. Brandon stood on the broken edge of the World Trade Center, looking straight into the bright blue September sky. Strong winds whipped his hair around his face, and burning papers fluttered down from somewhere above him. Exposed electric wires sparked in the sheared off walls. Brandon backed up against the stairwell door, his breath hitching in his throat. To his left and right, what was once an interior wall was now the outside wall of the North Tower. Below him, the Brooklyn Bridge stretched across the East River, as tiny as a model train set. He was almost 1,000 feet in the air, but this time there was no window between him and the open sky. The wet napkin Brandon had tied around his face whipped away into the sky. One long stride and he would join it, falling forever and ever and ever. Brandon's brain couldn't handle what he was seeing, and he sank, shaking, to what was left of the floor. He knew he should move, get back inside, but he was paralyzed with fear. The ledge he sat on followed the wall in both directions, but it was only 3 feet deep. He stared, horrified, at the emptiness around him. There should have been walls here, cubicles, desks, copiers, fax machines, water fountains, people. But there was no one, nothing. In his mind, Brandon kept seeing himself sliding off the edge and falling 89 stories to the ground. He tried not to think about it, but it was all he could think about. First, his feet would go over, then his legs. He imagined himself clawing and grabbing at the carpet, sobbing, desperate not to go over the side. He couldn't fall, but the pull of gravity was too much. He was too high up to resist. Over the ledge he would go, and then that terrible, awful sinking feeling as he fell backward, arms flailing, legs churning. There was nothing to grab onto, nowhere left to stand. He was disconnected from the earth, from everything he'd ever known. And then the ground would come rushing up toward him, closer, 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 until Brandon's eyes jerked open. His heart thundered in his chest, and every inch of him quivered. Like when he woke with a start from a nightmare, he was still sitting on the floor. He hadn't moved, hadn't fallen. But he was going to if he stayed out here much longer. The wind was a living thing up here, pushing and pulling at him like a cat playing with a toy. Brandon had to get up, get out. The whole 89th floor wasn't gone. He could see that now as his senses returned to him. There was still part of it, off to the sides and behind him. If he crawled along the broken hallway, he could make it around the corner, try to find the other stairwell, but his arms and his legs were lead. He couldn't make them move. Boom, 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 boom. Air pounded against Brandon, and the floor juddered underneath him. Suddenly, blue and white helicopters rose up right in front of where he sat. The helicopter hovered, rotating back and forth to hold its position, and Brandon saw the letters NYPD written in white on its side. How often had he seen the New York Police Department helicopter flying by overhead and wondered what trouble they were headed for? Now he was the trouble. Brandon put a hand up to keep the wind from his eyes, and the helicopter blocked the sun. He saw two people inside it, a man and a woman in dark blue uniforms, wearing helmets and sunglasses. Brandon's arms came to life, and he waved them over his head like someone stranded on a desert island, trying to catch the attention of a passing ship. The helicopter pilot put a hand to the microphone that bent around from the side of his helmet, like he was talking to someone, telling someone about Brandon. They had definitely seen him. They were going to help. Brandon almost laughed for joy. But the longer the helicopter hung there, the longer Brandon smiled and waved his arms, the more he realized there was nothing the police helicopter could do. It wasn't like they could land anywhere here on the 89th floor or even get close enough to lower him a rope or a ladder. There they were, safe in their helicopter, and here he was on the edge of a broken, burning building with a 1,000-foot deep gulf between them. Brandon lowered his hands and slumped against the door. He might as well have been on the moon for all they could do to help him. The people in the helicopter must have been thinking the same thing. The woman pulled off her sunglasses, and Brandon could see the anguish in her eyes. She knew Brandon couldn't hear her. Not through the window of the helicopter, not over the thundering blades and the roar of the wind, but she said something anyway. It might have been, "I'm sorry." The helicopter turned and flew away, and Brandon lifted a hand goodbye. Maybe they could help someone else. Maybe they could help his father get off the roof, and Brandon too, if he could get up there. Brandon's arms and legs obeyed him once again, and he knew he had a decision to make. He had to move from the spot, get off this ledge. But which direction should he go? The easiest thing to do, the sanest thing, was to slip back through the door behind him into the safety of the stairwell. But the only way that stairwell went anymore was down, and his father was up. There were 2 other stairwells, though, and if one of them went up from this floor, Brandon might still be able to get to the windows on the world. He had to try. Brandon wiped the tears from his eyes. The ledge he was on extended all the way along the interior wall to the south side of the building, which was still intact. Black smoke poured from the open hallway, but all Brandon had to do was crawl 10 or 15 feet along the ledge, and he would be on solid ground again. Brandon took a deep breath and maneuvered himself onto his hands and knees, his whole body shaking wildly. He wanted to close his eyes, but couldn't. He was afraid to even blink for fear of falling over the ledge. He kept his eyes down, ignoring the open sky and the falling papers and the dangling wires, one hand in front of the other, one leg at a time, never less than 3 parts of him connected to the floor. Brandon inched away from the stairwell door toward the south end of the building. His senses were alive to every little thing, every hint of danger, and he picked up on things he never would have noticed before. The grime along the baseboards of the wall, the hint of slime the carpet left on his fingers, the smell of burning gasoline in the air. The wind whipped Brandon's hair in his face again, and he twisted his head to clear his vision. A gust of wind caught him and dragged him towards the ledge, knocking him flat on his stomach. His nightmare came back to him then. The invented memory of sliding over the edge, of falling, and of leaving the earth, and his heart leaped into his throat. He cried out an indistinguishable gurgle of fear and despair, and he scrabbled at the damp carpet, desperate not to fall. And then suddenly he was being lifted, dragged, not toward the ledge, but away from it. Human hands grabbed him and pulled him into the smoke-filled hallway. Brandon and his rescuer collapsed to the safety of the floor far away from the ledge, and Brandon tried to catch his breath. "Holy crap, kid, where did you come from?" the rescuer asked, and Brandon looked up into a familiar face.